When inflation accelerates, it is usually framed as a failure of policy, a failure of discipline, a failure of control. Public debate tends to assume that inflation is something systems try to avoid, but occasionally fail to prevent. Historically, this assumption is misleading. Inflation is not what happens when systems lose control. It is what happens when systems choose continuity over rupture. Modern economic systems are built on obligations. Public debt, private debt, institutional promises extending decades into the future. These obligations cannot simply disappear without consequences. At certain points, systems face a constraint. Debt levels grow faster than real output. Servicing costs rise. Confidence begins to strain. At that moment, there are only a limited number of paths available. One option is explicit default. Another is systemic collapse through contraction. The third is gradual adjustment through inflation. From a purely economic perspective, these paths may appear comparable. From a political and institutional perspective, they are not. Default is immediate. It is visible. It names winners and losers in a single moment. Collapse is chaotic. It disrupts coordination. It rewrites power structures. Inflation, by contrast, is slow. It unfolds over time. It distributes losses across populations. It avoids a clear point of blame. This difference is critical. Systems are not optimized to minimize losses. They are optimized to manage instability. A sharp break forces confrontation. A gradual erosion allows adaptation. Inflation preserves nominal continuity even as real value shifts beneath the surface. Contracts remain valid. Institutions continue to operate. Payments are still made. Nothing appears broken, even though purchasing power declines. This is not accidental. Political systems depend on legitimacy. Legitimacy depends on continuity. Continuity depends on avoiding visible failure. Default is a visible failure. Collapse is an undeniable one. Inflation is ambiguous. It can be explained. It can be reinterpreted. It can be delayed. This ambiguity makes it politically survivable. Throughout history, systems repeatedly choose inflation over collapse, not because it is optimal, but because it is manageable. It allows governments to remain solvent without admitting insolvency. It allows institutions to function without renegotiating every obligation. It allows power structures to remain intact. This choice does not require conspiracy or intent. It emerges from incentives. Decision-makers operate under pressure. They respond to constraints. They choose paths that preserve stability long enough to maintain control. From this perspective, inflation is not an anomaly within modern systems. It is a stabilizing mechanism. Not a solution, but a delay. Not a fix, but a redistribution of adjustment across time. Understanding this reframes the debate. The relevant question is not why inflation occurs. The question is why systems so consistently prefer it to the alternatives. The answer lies not in economics alone, but in political survival. And once that logic is understood, inflation appears less like an accident and more like a structural choice. To understand why systems consistently prefer inflation, it is necessary to examine how different forms of adjustment unfold in time. Default is immediate. It represents a clear break between promise and reality. Obligations are no longer honored. Contracts lose meaning in a single moment. This immediacy is its defining feature. Losses occur simultaneously. Creditors are identified. Debtors are exposed. Trust collapses at once. From an accounting perspective, default may resolve imbalance quickly. From a political perspective, it creates a crisis of legitimacy. A default does not merely affect balance sheets. It affects coordination. Institutions built on trust suddenly become unreliable. Payment systems falter. Legal frameworks strain. Most importantly, default forces explicit acknowledgement of failure. Someone must accept responsibility. Someone must absorb losses. This concentration of blame is destabilizing. Inflation operates differently. It does not announce itself as a rupture. It unfolds gradually, often unevenly. Prices rise, but contracts remain. Debts are serviced, but their real burden changes. Nominal continuity is preserved. This temporal distribution is central. Losses occur, but not at once. They are spread across time, across sectors, across social groups. No single moment defines failure. This makes inflation politically manageable. Rather than confronting a clear crisis, systems adjust incrementally. Wages lag behind prices. Savings erode slowly. Asset values reprice unevenly. Each adjustment can be explained as temporary, external, or necessary. The system remains intact. This distinction explains why systems fear synchronized losses more than total losses. A sudden default concentrates pain. A prolonged inflation disperses it. From a systemic perspective, dispersion is preferable. Political institutions are poorly equipped to manage sharp discontinuities. They respond through negotiation, compromise, and delay. Inflation aligns with these mechanisms. It allows adjustment without confrontation. It avoids immediate renegotiation of every obligation. It buys time. Time in complex systems is stability. This logic applies regardless of intent. Even policymakers committed to stability face constraints. Raising taxes sharply creates backlash. Cutting spending rapidly undermines legitimacy. Explicit default destroys credibility. Inflation avoids these outcomes. It operates beneath the surface of formal policy. It does not require a single decision. It emerges through accommodation. This is why inflation often persists even when officially discouraged. Efforts to suppress it too aggressively risk triggering the very collapse systems seek to avoid. The result is a delicate balance. Inflation is tolerated as long as it remains gradual. It becomes unacceptable only when it accelerates beyond the system's capacity to explain it. At that point, legitimacy erodes faster than adjustment. But until that threshold is reached, inflation remains the preferred path. Not because it is efficient, but because it preserves coordination. Default resolves imbalance quickly but destroys trust. Inflation preserves trust but prolongs imbalance. Systems consistently choose the latter. This choice reflects a deeper priority. Modern systems are not optimized for equilibrium. They are optimized for continuity. Continuity allows power to persist. It allows institutions to adapt. It allows responsibility to remain diffuse. Inflation fits this requirement. Default does not. Understanding this difference clarifies why inflation appears repeatedly across history. It is not a recurring mistake. It is a recurring response to the same structural dilemma. When obligations exceed capacity, systems must adjust. They can do so abruptly or they can do so gradually. Again and again, they choose gradual erosion over immediate rupture. Not because it is invisible, but because it is survivable. Beyond timing, inflation and default differ fundamentally in how they affect institutional legitimacy. Legitimacy is not about efficiency. It is about acceptance. Modern systems rely on continuous recognition of authority. People comply not because systems are optimal, but because they appear functional. Default undermines this appearance immediately. When obligations are explicitly broken, institutions lose their narrative of reliability. Promises are revealed as conditional. Rules appear reversible. This revelation is destabilizing. Inflation avoids it. Under inflation, institutions continue to operate as if nothing fundamental has changed. Payments are made. Contracts are honored. Procedures remain intact. The system appears to be working even as real values deteriorate. This distinction matters politically. Legitimacy is easier to maintain when failure is ambiguous. Inflation introduces ambiguity. Is the problem external? Is it temporary? Is it global? Is it cyclical? These questions delay confrontation. Default offers no such buffer. It is binary. Promises are either kept or broken. There is no interpretive space. Inflation preserves interpretive space. This allows institutions to retain authority while adjustment occurs. It also allows responsibility to remain diffuse. Under default, responsibility concentrates quickly. Specific actors are blamed. Specific decisions are scrutinized. Under inflation, responsibility fragments. Prices rise for many reasons. Outcomes are attributed to markets, shocks, or global forces. No single decision appears decisive. This diffusion is stabilizing. Institutions survive not by avoiding harm, but by avoiding clarity. Clarity forces accountability. Accountability forces change. Inflation delays both. Nominal stability plays a crucial role here. Even when real purchasing power declines, nominal structures remain intact. Salaries continue to be paid. Benefits continue to be distributed. Budgets continue to exist. This continuity sustains legitimacy. People experience deterioration, but not collapse. This difference shapes political response. Gradual erosion generates frustration. Sudden rupture generates revolt. Systems are designed to manage frustration. They are poorly equipped to survive revolt. Inflation aligns with this design. It allows dissatisfaction to accumulate without crystallizing into a single moment of rejection. This does not eliminate risk. Persistent inflation erodes trust over time. Eventually, ambiguity disappears. But systems rely on their ability to manage the pace. As long as inflation remains gradual, legitimacy can be maintained. Once it accelerates beyond explanation, the trade-off changes. This is why inflation becomes politically intolerable only after crossing certain thresholds. Below those thresholds, it remains the preferred adjustment mechanism, not because it is harmless, but because it is controllable. Institutional legitimacy also depends on narrative consistency. Default forces a narrative reset. Past assurances are invalidated. Future promises are questioned. Inflation allows narratives to persist. Policy frameworks remain in place. Mandates remain unchanged. Language stays familiar. Only the substance shifts. This continuity is not superficial. It is functional. Systems require belief to operate. Belief depends on repetition. Repetition depends on stability of form. Inflation preserves form while altering content. This explains why institutions often resist acknowledging inflation as failure. To do so would collapse ambiguity. It would turn erosion into rupture. Instead, inflation is reframed as temporary, manageable, or external. These frames are not merely communicative strategies. They are structural necessities. Without them, legitimacy would erode faster than adjustment. From this perspective, inflation is not simply an economic outcome. It is an institutional shield. It protects systems from the immediate consequences of imbalance. It allows authority to persist under strain. Default removes that shield. And systems, when given the choice, rarely remove their own protection. Beyond legitimacy and timing, there is a deeper reason why systems prefer inflation to collapse. Collapse rewrites power. When a system defaults or contracts abruptly, existing hierarchies break down. Assets are repriced violently. Institutions lose authority. New actors emerge. This redistribution is not marginal. It is structural. Collapse does not merely reduce wealth. It reshuffles who controls it. For those in power, this is the primary risk. Inflation behaves differently. It alters real values without formally rewriting ownership or authority. Contracts remain valid. Institutions remain in place. Legal structures persist. Power endures, even as its substance shifts. This distinction explains much of modern economic behavior. Default forces renegotiation. Renegotiation invites conflict. Conflict invites reordering. Inflation avoids renegotiation. Debts are serviced. Governments continue to operate. Financial institutions remain solvent in nominal terms. No explicit reset occurs. From the system's perspective, this is crucial. Power systems value continuity over efficiency. They prioritize survival over optimization. Inflation allows survival. It preserves the framework within which power operates. Collapse threatens that framework. This is why inflation is often tolerated even when its consequences are well understood. Rising prices create dissatisfaction, but they do not automatically dismantle authority. People adapt. Institutions adjust. Collapse offers no such adaptation window. It forces immediate confrontation between those who lose and those who remain. History illustrates this pattern repeatedly. Periods of abrupt collapse coincide with regime change, social unrest, and institutional replacement. Periods of inflation coincide with continuity, even if that continuity is strained. This is not accidental. Inflation shifts burden without naming enemies. Collapse names them immediately. Political systems are built to manage ambiguity, not clarity. Ambiguity allows compromise. Clarity demands resolution. Inflation produces ambiguity. Who is responsible? Who benefits? Who loses? The answers are diffuse. Collapse produces clarity. Assets vanish. Savings are destroyed. Promises are broken. Responsibility becomes unavoidable. This difference explains why inflation is often described as a technical problem, while collapse is described as a crisis. One preserves the language of management. The other forces the language of failure. Inflation also preserves institutional memory. Policies evolve gradually. Frameworks adapt incrementally. Authority learns and adjusts. Collapse erases memory. Institutions disintegrate. Rules are rewritten. Experience loses relevance. For systems dependent on expertise and continuity, this loss is unacceptable. Inflation maintains institutional relevance. Central banks remain authoritative. Fiscal institutions continue to function. Administrative capacity survives. The system bends rather than breaks. This bending is often mistaken for weakness. In reality, it is resilience. Resilience does not mean absence of damage. It means the ability to absorb damage without losing form. Inflation provides that capacity. It allows systems to degrade without disintegrating. This does not imply that inflation is sustainable indefinitely. Over time, erosion accumulates. Eventually, trust weakens. At some point, ambiguity collapses. But until that point is reached, inflation remains preferable to collapse. Not because it avoids pain, but because it preserves power long enough to manage it. When faced with a choice between structural continuity and abrupt reordering, systems consistently choose continuity. Inflation supports that choice. Collapse undermines it. This is why, again and again, inflation is tolerated even when its costs are clear. The system is not choosing the best outcome. It is choosing the outcome that allows it to remain in control. When viewed structurally, inflation appears in a different light. It is not a mistake that systems fail to correct. It is not a deviation from an otherwise stable equilibrium. It is a choice made under constraint. Modern systems are built on promises that extend far into the future. Debt obligations, social commitments, institutional guarantees. These promises cannot all be honored in real terms indefinitely. At moments of stress, systems face a decision. They can acknowledge imbalance openly through default and collapse, or they can manage it quietly through inflation. Again and again, they choose the latter. This choice is not driven by ignorance. It is driven by survival. Collapse concentrates loss. It forces immediate renegotiation of power. It exposes the limits of authority. Inflation disperses loss. It stretches adjustment across time. It preserves institutional form even as substance erodes. From the system's perspective, this distinction is decisive. Political legitimacy depends on continuity. Continuity depends on avoiding visible failure. Inflation allows both. It keeps contracts nominally intact. It allows institutions to function. It maintains the appearance of control. None of this requires deception. It requires only that systems prioritize manageability over resolution. Inflation does not solve the underlying problem of excess obligation. It delays its consequences. But delay is often sufficient. Delay allows adaptation. It allows reallocation without confrontation. It allows power structures to persist long enough to adjust. This is why inflation recurs across history. Different currencies, different institutions, different political systems. The pattern remains the same. When faced with the prospect of collapse, systems choose erosion, not because erosion is painless, but because it is survivable. This does not mean inflation is benign. Over time, it undermines trust. It distorts signals. It reshapes incentives. Eventually, ambiguity gives way to clarity. But until that point is reached, inflation remains preferable to collapse. It offers a way to manage decline without surrendering control. Understanding this reframes the debate. The question is not whether inflation should exist. The question is why systems rely on it so consistently. The answer lies not in economics alone, but in power. Inflation preserves continuity. Collapse rewrites order. When forced to choose, systems choose continuity. And as long as modern economies remain dependent on debt, obligations, and political legitimacy, that choice will continue to shape outcomes.